and most welcome to 1564 of the Heidegger series, and today continue with Joachim Schulte's Experience and Expression from 1995, and it's Wittgenstein's philosophy of psychology. Where we left off last is about aspect seeing. Looking deeply into the different viewpoints. You can call it from the first person perspective or the third person perspective. They infer different results. So one could say that they are dependent on the context. For instance, one quote from page 60 here is: this change of perspective away from myself and towards other people, and the new focus on utterances in the third person. This objectivization of the relevant state of affairs, as one may call it, is of course not intended to deny the reality of the experience in question. It never occurs to Wittgenstein to negate the faculty of the inner experience, and I think that is very important. It is more that the relationship between inner and outer is much more complicated than we usually see. What he does is to grasp at the peculiar and problematic features of experiences by looking at them from the other side. As it were, for the reason they appeared problematic, was that starting from one's own experience did not lead to a convincing way of dividing up the different elements and more or less characteristic properties constitutive of such experiences. For this reason, Wittgenstein warns us, do not try to analyze your experience internally. And I think that is more exactly to the point. It is this wish to subjectivize or privatize experience, making it a strict inner, something that cannot enter into the outer world. We have it in private language. Idea of an inner understanding that starts from the inside, and it is strictly hidden from anyone being able to participate. Instead, Wittgenstein is pressing quite forcefully the intersubjectivity. And I will begin a bit earlier than I left off last time. I'm at the end of page 60. There is one obvious difference between a subjective and objective or objectivized approach, which is frequently stressed by Wittgenstein. And it consists in this, that the subjective account, by contrast with the objective one, does not offer an intersubjectively helpful criterion for testing the relevant statements. This is a disadvantage. Not only because other people will not know how to deal with my statements, but also because I myself, if I keep insisting on the purely subjective approach, will have no means of testing my own statements. Of course, the difference between a subjective and an objective way of looking at things does not reside in the number of people who are present. Even in silent soliloquy can I objectivize my investigation by formulating it in such a way that another person could join in the discussion. This is the reason why a necessarily private way of indicating sense data, feelings, experiences, etc. must not play any role in an objectivized account. A mere statement like, "I see it this way," remains useless unless something is added to it. However intensely I may feel about it, it will leave myself just as much in the dark as my audience. This consideration gives the following remark its point. Always always eliminate the private object for yourself by supposing that it keeps on altering. You don't notice this, however, because your memory keeps on deceiving you. This implies no claim about the existence or non-existence of entities that might rightly or wrongly be called private objects. The problem of the reality of such entities is not in question here. What Wittgenstein wants to bring out is his methodological maxim to leave allegedly private objects out of account, as it will help neither myself nor others to arrive at a better understanding of what I am saying. Now we may, for example, want to ask which criterion of visual experience is at the disposal of an objectivized account. Wittgenstein's answer is that it is the reproduction of what is seen. As we have noticed, however, the rendering or reproduction of what is seen may, in the case of our peculiar visual experience, agree with the reproduction of what is seen in a normal case of seeing something. But this agreement is present only on the surface. It is an agreement of the pictures drawn or of the words used by the two speakers. Here Wittgenstein mentions the following example. I look at an animal in a cage, I'm asked. What do you see? I answer, a rabbit. I gaze into the countryside and suddenly a rabbit runs past. I exclaim, a rabbit. If only the verbal form of expression is taken into account, there is virtually no difference between those two cases. But if one considers the utterances in their wider context, then one will no longer wish to claim that the words used express the same thing. Even though both things, both the report and the exclamation, can be called expressions of perception and of visual experience. it is nonetheless true that the exclamation is so in a different sense from the report. It wrests itself from us. It is related to the experience as a cry is to pain. And here is a very important point, and it's the unrelatedness. We look too much for a cause, and everything seems to hook into each other, where we get this causal chain, which is how we call erratic thinking, or thinking gone wild, going nowhere quick. The relation between cry and pain, which is here alluded to by Wittgenstein, is not some identifiable, definite causal relation. What is meant is rather the characteristic way cry and pain are embedded in situations of human life. The fact that a cry wrests itself from a person who is utterly surprised is not something which no one except for this person will be able to notice. It is a fact which we as outsiders may well be in a position to grasp and recognize from his movements, the tone of the voice, the tone of his voice, his facial expression, just as we are in a position to recognize a cry of pain from its typical features. When a person utters a certain kind of cry, we do not normally need to ask him if this was a cheerful cry, to point a cry of anger or a cry of pain. The situation and his behavior within it will normally leave no doubt about the nature of his cry. And in the same way, purely verbal agreement notwithstanding, the reproduction of what is seen may make it clear whether we are confronted with a report or an exclamation, that is, with a simple description of what has been perceived. Or with an expression of peculiar experience. the difference between a report about what has been seen and an expression of a visual experience lies both in one's reactions to what one sees and in the consequences of seeing it for the rendering or reproduction of what has been seen. That is, in the way this rendering or reproduction enters into various language games. This is very important, I'll repeat it. The difference between a report about what has been seen and an expression of a visual experience lies both in one's reactions to what one sees and in the consequences of seeing it for the rendering or reproduction of what has been seen, that is, in the way this rendering or reproduction enters into various language games. In the first case, that of a report, the rendering of what has been seen is a simple description of things and events. In the second case, that of an exclamation, there are, according to the kind of experience concerned, different characteristic forms of reaction which are mirrored. if not by the chosen words themselves, then by the way they are pronounced, by the tone of the voice and other circumstances. Typically, it is not only the voice or the phrases used which express all this, but also gestures and movements of the face. For example, you imitate what you are observing. You narrow your eyes. You speak in a tone of surprise or disbelief. You make certain comparisons. Here there are, of course, considerable differences between various kinds of perceptual experience. If you know what a rabbit is, but are surprised by one crossing your path, your reaction will hardly be more than a mere, "Can I really trust my eyes?" As regards the As regards the consequences, however, the rendering or reproduction of what one has seen may be very different from those in the case of a simple report. thus it will often be the case that a person who is surprised but what he has seen will continue with an explanation which specifies why he is surprised and why he has had a special experience when seeing that rabbit. In cases of seeing as things are more complicated yet, the reaction of a person who has had a peculiar perceptual experience or is just having one will express itself in his gestures, in his face, and in a typical phrase like, I have seen this as that. Perhaps even in a certain perplexity and in his looking for appropriate analogies which could render his experience more vivid. But while in normal cases of surprise, the relevant consequences will consist in explanatory remarks such as, I should never have thought that there are rabbits in the center of Oxford, etc. In cases of seeing as reference will be made to the experience itself, and one will try to give an idea of the peculiarity of that experience. As has already been stressed, In these cases, as has already been stressed, in these cases reference to the experience cannot be a straightforward kind of pointing to. And it is useless to place your interlocutor in the same situation as you were when you had a peculiar experience of seeing something as such and such. And then tell him that now he is having the same experience as you had earlier on. Such an arrangement, unless it is part of a psychological experiment, will at best serve to teach the other person what the expression change of aspect means, or to make him familiar with a certain kind of aspect. But it does not help us to get a better understanding either of the phenomenon of seeing as, or of the corresponding concept. The kind of reference which is intended by Wittgenstein, and which, in his opinion, might help us to get clearer about the peculiar experience, takes its start from the expression of experience. Put a little pause there. So I continue my read of Joachim Schulte's Experience and Expression. We're currently on page 63, third paragraph. we've been discussing perceptual experience is much more than the words, intonation, and general context. It's enormously much more.
Mum's got, I think Mum had a load of heart problems. She was in hospital. Mum's got to the hospital. She's got like an irregular heartbeat. So, yeah, she had COVID at the same time. Really,
Such an arrangement, unless it's part of psychological experiments we were discussing here now,
but she's good otherwise. But she's also got two but she's also got two holes in her eyes as well, so, or two bubbles. So but she's got an operation this month. Yeah? She's quite well. In one eye.
Yeah,
They have to hold your eyes open the machine.
Yeah, even though you couldn't.
Yeah. Actually, he was
such an
and just like little like cut and Hammarbergska, like the blue, yeah, it's like squirt out on me. It's like, oh my god, I was crazy. I mean, it hurt, but scary. It wasn't scary. It was scary.
when you are in the situation and you tell about your aspect C in that particular situation, everything will be clear. There will be no doubt what your experience was about. It can be heard in all facets of your saying. This Schulte calls it lies both in one's reactions to what one sees and also very important in the consequences of seeing it for rendering or reproduction of what has been seen. That is, in the way this rendering or reproduction enters into various language games. So be careful to not mix report with what's happening. Do not confuse the inner experience with your report of it, because especially the report has a completely different purpose, object.
You can just go there like a recreational hobby thing, like every day take the tram.
We've got the DGI
Such an arrangement, unless it is part of a psychological experiment, will at best serve to teach the other person what the expression change of aspect means, or to make him familiar with a certain kind of aspect.
Yeah. No, did you look at her when you said that?
No, but it sucked so much. You see like 10 euros, but then it's like 12. Well, 120.
Yeah.
Everything is 12. if it's 1 to 0. It's 12.
The kind of reference which is intended by Wittgenstein
Then you can focus much more. But yeah, Croatia was expensive. But at least Dubrovnik.
Yeah, but I mean it's the most touristic.
Yeah. That's where they filmed that also for up prices.
Did you see Amelia Clark when you were there?
Just walks around.
She come naked out of the fire.
is well worth repeating.
We saw some guys walking down the street up here the other day, and literally was like,
The kind of reference which is intended by Wittgenstein and which, in his opinion, might help us to get clearer about the peculiar experience takes its start from the expression of experience.
what was the highlight of the trip?
Well, I had a coffee.
And the expression may be helpful because it will suggest natural ways of continuing a description.
Monte Carlo.
To Alex.
Really?
Yeah. His family has a house there.
And he was there at
Of
the time?
course, Wittgenstein does underline
No, we must
that here there are hugely many interrelated phenomena and possible concepts.
He got a car there, a boat there.
But at the same time, he hints at a few more closely circumscribed types of cases, which may help us to explain the or his meaning.
Did you only say that for 10 minutes?
No, my God.
Oh, right. To bring down anxiety or something?
It's for business.
Business? Oh.
It's a business film.
Helps me remember my. Remember my.
It's my. Yeah. Yeah, Montenegro was about 40% cheaper, and of course it was still expensive. Not for me maybe, but for like normal people living there. Not normal.
Among the possibilities, he hints that there is first the use of a
Like
conceptual
Alex, it's a classic one. The closer you are to the ocean, he says like if you drive up the mountain,
explanation,
it's like
and
almost
secondly,
half the price. And it was already like 40% cheaper.
the reproduction of experiencing an aesthetic
Did you drive around there or was it?
Alex over.
aesthetic aspect by means of giving an account
We went to some couple
of what one
Did you
has
drive around-
experienced.
Did you drive around in Croatia? Or
No. It was only 2 nights, and we spent most of the time all the time. And like one day we went to the city, and there's like an island. Well, there's multiple islands, but there was another island.
You went to,
And that's where I proposed. Before I went to we went to the trip, I bought a ring and I bought a classic box. And then when we arrived, I was like,
Now,
wait,
one cannot be absolutely certain
it's gonna give away.
what Wittgenstein here intends by a conceptual explanation.
I threw it in there in the room, and then I put the ring in like a small couch.
didn't think about like the dessert thing.
He writes, sometimes the conceptual is dominant in an aspect.
Soon all your
And then you realise that comes after marriage, not before. And you've
That is to say, sometimes the experience of an
your
aspect
geography is all
can be expressed only through a conceptual explanation.
that was in time. Just took better photos. No, more photos, sorry.
Quality before quantity.
And this explanation can take many different forms.
Oh no, of course.
Yeah. It was performed that way, right?
Ah.
It was the beginning of August.
You weren't like 5.
It's like in the Browning and split in the middle.
But the examples, which are scattered over several manuscripts, suggest that what he has in mind are explanations containing characteristic formulations such as there was an abrupt change, and then I saw why, or at first I saw nothing but confusion, but gradually the picture became organized and suddenly I saw a face and so forth. These are cases where the use of such formulas and general concepts is a natural expression of, or an immediate reaction to the experience in question.
I don't know how it was with you with it, but they were very underground. They were, yeah, very
And we got written by a friend and it appeared to have an energy of 0 by
There was actually loads of mosquitoes in Florida, in the city. I was like, what?
A typical consequence of such a reaction would be to continue by mentioning analogies. For instance, it was as if I had suddenly seen the picture in a different light, or by using typical phrases like all of a sudden I saw,
I actually, before I even booked the tickets,
or the scales were removed from my eyes and I realized.
actually just seeing them now. I regretted I didn't go when they were here in Scotland. And then I was like, I made a book the tickets. And the only places that were left were Vienna and yeah. And I actually looked up, I was thinking like, oh, it must be cheap in Turkey. And it was, the hotels and flight times were reversed. So, yeah,
The second possibility mentioned was that of experiencing an aesthetic aspect.
what did you do? I looked up a bit.
For example, hearing a tune in a certain way.
Exactly, it's just walk around, sit in a cafe,
It's not like, oh, you need to go to this. Oh, you need to do this. Oh, you need to walk up and down the
Yeah, Wittgenstein alludes to several characteristics, forms of expressing such an experience. Gestures or movement with one's hands, involuntary dance steps, and in particular playing or singing the tune in a way that which underlines the experience. For instance, by stressing the felt rhythm, or by accentuating an unexpected part of a transition.
It is a bit ridiculous. He's like a CIA spy that's every time.
I give up on like 1.5 minutes. Yeah, life is too short.
Oh yeah, that's bad. So you want the weird 15
I hear it differently, and now I can play it differently.
Good stuff. Actually, a lot better than some normal shows, I have to say.
you know, guess what Maria's guilty pleasure is? I've been watching this up and Love is Blind.
It's funny.
You can explain.
Oh,
I mean, it's a TV show where different people meet and date without seeing each other. And then they just like I mean, it's surprising how it
Thus, I can render it differently. It's also of great importance
and
here.
everyone's like, oh, I didn't know how the girl looks like. And then if the girl is bigger than you expected, she said, oh no, how she's too much.
how do you just talk, or do you like them to women?
Expressing the experience is here essentially connected with an activity, a way of accompanying the tune, which comes to the fore in certain movements or unusual way of playing, singing or whistling, the tune suggesting the peculiarity of one's experience.
Asking them to marry and bringing them back to America for a green card and stuff. So, yeah, most different.
It has no chance. It's like this.
Yeah, it's a big S, it's called big A. So there's like a lot of different versions of the TV series.
Parallels to this can be found in the realm
Because
of
the other one
visual
already
experiences.
myth, and now it's trying
Thus,
to bring
one may underline the experienced visual aspect by tracing a certain line
and you see like
in a drawing with a broad pencil stroke, or simply with
like proper
one's finger.
and people coming to like a house apartment. Not even yeah, exactly. Not even an apartment, it's like a shed. No water, no electricity. Yeah, you need to if you want to go shower you have like a I don't know, like a bucket and like stand and you see like living room. Such a good bitch.
Där kommer du lite andra områden.
Like in Moscow, they still every summer they turn off water for 2 weeks. But before it was 1 month. Yeah, in different areas.
In these last cases, experience and activity appear particularly closely connected.
Surprising, but really cool.
It was actually not a concept. It was like no, it's like it's not Nordic. It's like a Nordic. It's like Stockholm. Like
I mean, yeah, it's like a bigger version.
I dare to say. But I love Moscow. It's so cool. I mean, you can see the old like statues from the colonies, like from the Soviet, and like blends with the new stuff, the modern buildings.
Here, our response to a certain experience
Like women
is a natural reaction.
yeah, the hammers, like yeah, you know, it's like weird. It's like
It comes automatically, just as certain concepts force themselves on us in the case of conceptual explanations.
It was an effort to go to
Of course, the immediacy of such reactions and the suggestiveness of those concepts are by no means purely natural phenomena. Even though they may be based on primitive or instinctive forms of behavior, in the way this is true of our natural pain expressions, they tend to be shaped by certain activities, conventions, and types of explanation which are typical of the relevant language game.
That was really
This shows that a sequence experience, reaction, consequence, is not to be read in the one direction.
I was thinking exactly Romania. I know, like, nobody smiles. It's like, the whole thing.
Such consequences, that is, follow-up explanations, the specific continuation of expression of a peculiar experience in various kinds of language game do not remain without influence on the type of reaction concerned, and even on the way the experience is felt. This is one reason for thinking that the phenomenon we are interested in cannot easily be divided into separate parts corresponding to either seeing or interpreting, experience or activity. And this is so both in the case of a subjective and in that of an objectivized approach. Naturally, an objectivized approach has this advantage, that it allows us to place an experience in a wider context which a subjective approach, if consistent, cannot take into account.
I can tell.
No, it wasn't.
And only if an experience is seen in the context of its expression and its consequences will it become possible to draw helpful conceptual distinctions and to make explanatory comparisons.
Yes, I know.
these distinctions and explanations will always be restricted to individual cases, and their relevance will remain limited. There simply is no common denominator making for uniformity, and that is a fact which we shall have to put up with.
When you were leaving Helsinki?
Yeah, when we were leaving home.
Was it then?
That's the weird part. He was at the gas station, like renting
I wanted to carry things at the back.
There are many ways of experiencing aspects. What they have in common is the expression, now I see it as that, or now I see it this way, or now it's this, now that, or now I hear it as, and a while ago I heard it as. But the explanation of these acts, these ways, is radically different in the different cases.
So I suddenly shook my hand. I thought, when we went go-karting, you won't remember.
Oh, you were
Appendix
yeah,
65.
I've never seen someone.
the first time we
In his book on Wittgenstein's appendix, meaning blindness and introspection,
I've just never seen somebody go so slowly into a wall and hit it so hard.
in his book on Wittgenstein's notion of rule and private language, Saul Kripke makes some points which are closely connected with
I think if that was like 5 miles an hour, I might have broken.
which is closely connected with the considerations of the present chapter.
No, the boy that cried wolf or something.
Kripke is right in emphasizing that Wittgenstein's remarks are not compatible with the behaviorist theory, but at the same time he makes the surprising claim that Wittgenstein's method of investigation and his way of employing thought experiments are to be regarded as largely introspective proceedings.
11 hours from London? exposure, it's 13 hours on the way back.
And you're allowed to fly off Russia now, right? So it's like,
Oh no, that's the flight stuff, yeah. I went last August. But it was amazing because we flew over Azerbaijan. We'll get back to it. Okay. Yeah. Flew over that night time. It just looks so amazing. I've seen like, as we went back from the map, I just looked out of the plane and it was at the exact
While
same
Kripke
angle as
approves of Wittgenstein's thesis that the psychological processes which may accompany meaning and understanding are not constitutive of what we mean by meaning and understanding. He declares that in his opinion, Wittgenstein runs the risk of promoting too mechanistic a conception, even though his own investigations are essentially introspective ones.
There's a lot of people in the hot water's waterfall trying to smile, trying to sweating. How long did I stay? Well, I've been staying for 3 weeks, I think. When I went to Seoul, down to this little place called Jeju Island, and then to Busan, and then back up to Seoul. Very quick, but I saw quite a lot of cool things. And one of my friends who's second Korean nuts.
In part 2 of the philosophical investigations, that is while working on his manuscripts on the philosophy of psychology, Wittgenstein, according to Kripke's reading, became aware that he had run that risk, and this is said to be particularly evident in his remarks on meaning blindness.
You can do that because you can go into one of those little huts, sort of past.
Summarizing, Kripke writes, could there be a meaning blind person who operated with words just as we do? If so, would we say he is as much in command of the language as us?
No more business in that place.
I really wanted to go to the Dad went in the 90s and had all like this like silver memorabilia. That really bought it from the back.
The official answer to the second question
Yeah, it's probably more.
is yes, but perhaps the answer should be say what you want as long as you know the facts. It is not clear that the problem is entirely resolved. Note that here, too, the discussion is introspective, based on an investigation of our own phenomenal experience. It is not the kind of investigation that would be undertaken by behaviorists.
They don't go back in time. Oh, they do actually. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they go back in time at one point. Critism of Azkaban. No, what's that?
Yeah, that's at the
What is obviously correct in Kripke's statement that Wittgenstein does not proceed in a behaviorist fashion, although he does, as Kripke also notes, sympathize with certain aspects of behaviorist attitude.
Oh yeah, it's like reading
Kripke's further claim, however, according to which Wittgenstein proceeds introspectively, cannot be correct. If my remarks about an objectivized approach are true,
So what are you going to do after the summer?
I'm going to do my thesis at university, finish, and wasting the taxpayers' money. English linguistics.
I didn't mean it to come up like that, but
it must also be remembered that there is no reason to suppose that behaviorism and introspection are the only alternatives to be considered.
How to write academic papers correctly according to the it's not. So
actually did the same thing in Romania, like really easy for me.
So that from a rejection of behaviorism, one could infer the soundness of an introspective method.
it's really tricky.
Yeah.
I remember
But quite apart from this point, I shall try to show that Kripke's claim is misguided, that his reconstruction of Wittgenstein's way of asking his questions is wide off the mark, and his answer correspondingly inadequate. As a first step, we shall have to find out what the point of Wittgenstein's remarks about meaning blindness is. In order to support his claim, Kripke not only refers to a few remarks from the second part of philosophical investigations, but also to the highly constructive preface by Rush Rees to his edition of the Blue and Brown books. In his preface, Rees writes that to the question of why language does not appear to be a mere mechanism, but something alive, Wittgenstein tends to answer by pointing out that signs gain their life through intercourse with other speakers, through being used in linguistic exchanges, and that his answer will often be sufficient. In some cases, however, it may be possible to raise the objection that someone might do all that, make the signs correctly in the game with other people and get along all right, even if he were meaning blind. Wittgenstein used that expression in analogy with colorblind and tone deaf.
I've got a picture of some
Open my favorite album.
If I say an ambiguous word to you, like bored for instance, I may ask you what the meaning you think of when you hear it. You may say that you think of a committee like the whole board. Or perhaps you do not think of Planck. Well, could we not imagine someone who could make no sense of such a question? And if you just said a word to him like that, it gave him no meaning. And yet he could react with words to the sentences and other utterances he encountered, and to situations too and react correctly. Or can we not imagine Wittgenstein was not sure, I think. If a man were a meaning line, would that make any difference to his use of language? Or does the perception of meaning fall outside the use of language? Now it's possible that Kripke has been misled by Rie's account, for that which is here described as meaning blindness is not at all the same phenomenon as that intended by Wittgenstein in his remarks written in the late 40s.
So this is a tornado ripped through your house or something, you can't have an insurance. In the sense of free
you can't go and say
it's God's will.
To put it briefly, Ries gives an exaggerated account of what is meant by a meaning blind person.
Not if you go to the
Self-clean.
Even if the intended notion of meaning blindness is not clearly
It'll
definable,
be so clean, pure.
on the same road. It's much like 1,000 cars.
Wittgenstein does mention sufficiently many examples to indicate which kinds of cases are obviously excluded.
Like in my brain.
Thus it becomes clear that the meaning blind person is not blind in the sense that someone may be born without eyesight. What a meaning blind person is lacking is not a certain kind of sensation, sense perception.
Well, I've got to stay here in the meantime.
Sense impression.
I've got to go physically to the lecture. I can't do it online. But I think after that, I'll probably
It would not even be correct to claim that a meaning blind man is incapable of making anything of questions about the meanings of words in general, or of ambiguous words in particular. Wittgenstein explicitly states that a meaning blind man can now say that a certain meaning has occurred to him, and later that a different meaning has occurred to him, just as he is able to feel on different bearers of one of the same proper name, used on different occasions. And I put a stop here.
I have to admit the last one, and it really did tell off every time I read words back. No, the last time I went where I didn't like it was Black Friday, and it was just completely swamped with
So Kripke is mistaken, according to Schulte, in his view that Wittgenstein is actually talking about inner experiences. And it's this very innerness that we've been discussing both by Paul Johnston, Joachim Schulte, but also Livingstone. They are all leaning to the reading that innerness is not at all excluded, but to mistake innerness for the spoken reports of things is to be widely mistaken. They say, reading Wittgenstein, there is not really any doubt to what he's referring to. It would be extremely far-fetched to say that he's defending inner dialogue or some sort of Kripkean logic of innerness. Instead, we need criteria to understand when something is correct. We also need that criteria even for ourselves. They are not something limiting, they are essential for the constructs of meaning. If we lose out on the outside world, we will, so to speak, lost in space. We will be having nothing to adhere to.
And they'll clean out the previous part with me.
Clean your way. Where is the
What about the ventilation?
And I think you see more and more. We mentioned this meaning blindness and aspect blindness before, but it makes less and less sense to, so to speak, assume that such a thing could be as meaning blindness. If it still works pretty much perfect in reality, having no problem of communicating in interacting, intending, doing things. And being able to have an inner life as well without confusing the reports or talking or mentioning of that inner life for the inner life. That is also present. It's not inner in a classical sense or a Kripkean sense.
it's just fine. It's like that.
Well, indeed, thank you very much for your patience. I hope my voice could get through, and have a very pleasant day, night, or evening, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.
I'm gonna go to the coke factory and buy a whistle.